Welcome back to the first team. I am Joe DeLeone. Joining me as always is my good friend and NFL draft analyst, Ryan Roberts. Today we are going to be talking about the top performers from the entire week at the Senior Bowl. The third day of practices wrapped up today on Thursday. So we're going to be breaking down, sharing our guys at each individual position group that we thought really shined and had really, really good weeks. Ryan, let's start with the offensive line because it seems like they were the premier group this week. They were the biggest,
Yep.
They had the biggest spotlight, if you will, for good and bad reasons. We got to see a lot of really good athletes, a lot of really stout players. I'll let you start us off here first. Who is your offensive lineman that you think had the best week at the 2024 Senior Bowl?
It was such a hard one, man. I had 3 guys written down, Joe, and it was like a jockeying for positioning, man. But there were a
You're
lot
going to
of
name all
really
three
good
of them,
offensive.
aren't you?
I'm not going to. I might name drop them at the end if we have a little bit of time. But it was just making the point that this was a really good offensive line class down in Mobile, Alabama. There were a lot of really good players. I would have to, if you ask me who was the absolute best in my opinion, it would be, even though he didn't practice day 3, it would be Jackson Powers Johnson out of Oregon, the center. I just Look, I thought that we were going to come into this week and have a Zach Frazier versus Jackson Powers Johnson debates. And, obviously, this isn't going to change my evaluation. I'm still very high on Zach Frazier, obviously, but Jackson Powers Johnson did so much this week that I have to be very honest with you guys. And this is what verification process happens here. I'm going to go back and I'm going to watch Jackson a little bit more because he was even better than I thought he was. I had a firm second round grade on him. I find it hard to believe if he put on film nearly what I saw this week in Mobile. I find it hard to believe that he's going to get out of the first rounds. I mean, he was first and foremost, he keeps a great base all the time. He's always square to the line of scrimmage and subtle, really good foot quickness, man. Like he was just moving incredibly well laterally and pass protection. Felt like he didn't lose a rep all week. So Jackson Powers Johnson, 339 pounds, center by trade, but also played guard this week. And I thought he looked pretty dang good at guard as well. Probably the top interior offensive lineman here by a decent margin this week. So
Yeah, it was cool getting to see him play center and guard this week, which was awesome
yeah,
to really paint that picture that he has versatility. Originally, he was a guard at Oregon, and I agree with everything you said there. He was my pick as well. Just a really good basis that he shows up with on every single play, and that was what stood out
yeah.
to me when I watched his film and why I had him as my top center is that the base was just always so good and consistent. He's got a really good upper body strength as well. And in all these reps, man, he just mirrored so well. He kept guys in front of him. He kept wide footing and just was so strong and consistent. So it makes a lot of sense. And I think the best example, there was one rep where Michael Hall Jr., who's a really twitched up guy, really fast, quick interior defensive lineman, tries to spin on him. And Jackson Powers Johnson
Yeah.
counters and catches him, which I think is just really good proof that his instincts, his awareness, all that stuff, it's on a completely different level.
It probably showed that Jackson was doing a little bit of studying going into day 2 as well,
Maybe.
because Michael Hall hit a 6 spin on who was it? Yeah, it was a Michigan. It was Ladarius Henderson during the first day,
Yeah,
I
might have been.
believe.
Might have been.
It was, or Trevor Keegan. I think it might have been Trevor Keegan. It was one of the Michigan guys though, but he had a vicious spin cycle on him. And then day 2, I mean, like you said, he erased him. And I know you said he played guard at Oregon earlier in his career. He obviously played center this past year and was an all-pack selection, all-American selection. Joe, I don't know if you heard the story, but he also apparently played one game at defensive line as a true freshman out of necessity.
Wow.
So pretty versatile player, man. It's pretty cool. Pretty cool to kind of learn a little bit of the backstory there about Jackson.
BetOnline remains your top spot for all of your live betting action and contests. NFL, college football, UFC, NHL are all in full swing. BetOnline is your number one source for wagering news, odds, trends, and predictions with both desktop and mobile access at any time. Head to BetOnline today and use promo code BELIEVE, that's BLEAV, for 50% off your first deposit. That is a 50% welcome bonus. Bet online, where the game starts. All right, I'm going to throw my first defensive lineman out there. I was grappling with Gabe Hall and
Okay.
potentially mentioning him, and I was really thinking about it. But I got to go with Lietu Latu just for the fact that he's so technically sound. And I know that the first day we kind of said let's try not to just like really hone in on the big names, but we kind of have to do that for this show. He a number of times reminded us of the fact that maybe he's not the most premier athlete of the group, but if
Yep.
we look at every single edge rusher that was at the Senior Bowl, there isn't a single one that is on the same level as him or even close to him from just a technical standpoint. His counters to his initial moves, when those don't work, his understanding of leverage and how to properly orient himself, I think, is just really promising for him as a draft prospect. I don't know if he's done enough to really become that top edge prospect. The medicals might get in the way here with him. And I mean, also, let's be honest here, Dallas Turner and Jared Verse might have some crazy testing numbers that are much more twitched up that might help them out. But still, Lietu Latu, I thought just really went to work with that lunch pail type mentality. I know it's such a stupid draft cliche, but he just went to work. He grinded guys out and he found ways to win reps.
That's what he did at UCLA as well. I mean, he is just he's probably the highest floor pass rusher in this draft, right? Because he just has not only a great pass rush repertoire, but he
Yeah.
also has a million counters off of everything he does. And he has a great innate understanding of when to hit certain counters, when to work back inside, when to, hit a club rip, work back to the inside track. Like he just has a really innate understanding of how to string moves together, which is a pretty rare thing. He was on my short list, Joe. I ended up deferring to Darius Robinson, who we talked about yesterday
Mm.
from Missouri. 6'4 plus, 280 plus pounds, 34 plus inch arms. I talked about it a little bit. 2022, he played a lot more inside for Mizzou. Didn't really love the film. I thought he was a little bit out of place inside. I just didn't love the ability for him to work at the point of attack consistently. He didn't love the hand uses that year. But this year for the Tigers, they used him strictly pretty much as a outside pass rusher, as a defensive end. And he's just so much more comfortable from that alignment, man. Like the wider he goes, he looks more and more comfortable, which is kind of rare for a kid that is 285 pounds. I mean, like you just don't see that a ton, but he was just winning constantly because that kid is twitched up. He's explosive. He can inside counters, but also he's pretty flexible and pretty bendy for a guy his size as well. So he can win the outside track a little bit at times. This kid made himself a lot of money, Joe. And I think that, look, I'm not ready to call him a first round. I'm not really ready to predict that he's going to go in the first rounds, but this is the type of profile that typically does end up rising that high because you
Yeah.
just don't see a lot of athletes that look like him that move like him, right? So Darius Robinson, I thought had a great week. Honorable mention to Adisa Isaac. I know you don't want me to throw in extra guys, but Adisa Isaac for Penn State,
Boo!
really good player.
No, I'm
You
just
literally
kidding.
just threw somebody in before this. You literally just threw somebody in on the last one. I think you
I
did.
know,
Yeah,
I know.
yeah.
I'm
So
being
you're sneaking, guys, man. You're sneaking.
a dickhead. Let me let me throw in move on here to defensive backs. I mean, we have the same guy. It's Quinyon Mitchell. I would be
How do
completely
you know that?
stunned if you didn't.
How do you know that?
You
How do
would
you know
have
that?
to be, needing eye surgery on top of your glasses if you weren't going to come here and say Quinyon Mitchell. I think everybody and their mother knows that Quinyon Mitchell was the best performer at the Senior Bowl this whole entire week. I mean, the guy was just unbelievable. His foot quickness, his mobility, his hip mobility that showed up in these drills, and then like the play strength was phenomenal. I don't think anyone locked anyone down as consistently as he did, and he just continually dominated on every single rep that he was on the field.
I made a claim yesterday that I thought would be maybe a little bit of a controversial one. I know that you agreed with me, but just in
Yeah,
general,
I
I
don't
thought
think it's
maybe some people.
controversial.
He was the best player in Mobile this week, Joe. I mean, he
Yeah,
was from start to finish. Quinyon Mitchell barely lost a rep. He looked at times like he was toying with dudes, man, because he's just so controlled, such great vision. And he also really to change a direction and the ability for him to win with the football in the air as a defensive back and not panic. That's where a lot of guys get in trouble. I looked to the rep that really signified his week for me was I think it was a deep post that Brendan Rice ran against Quinyon Mitchell, right? You know, the rep I'm talking about where it looked like Quinyon was jogging the
yeah.
entire way and nonchalantly plucks the football out of the air for an interception. It's just like I he makes everything look so easy. You know why makes everything look easy? Because he's got good straight line speed, he's got really good shit area quickness, and he's played a lot of football over the last couple years, and he's been tested. This kid's a first round pick all day, every day. I've been mocking him at the end of first rounds, Joe. I wouldn't be shocked. And here's my claim. Here's another take, I guess. Top 20 pick Quinyon Mitchell come April. Top 20 in this draft, potentially.
I think that it's going to
Would it
happen. And
shock you if he's not number one corner and drafted? Would it shock you? I wouldn't be
yes,
shocked.
that would
I
shock
wouldn't
me.
be.
I
I
don't
wouldn't
think
be.
it. He's a good football player, but I think at the end of the day, Nate Wiggins, Kool-Aid McKinstry, and Tyrion Arnold are just a little bit better than him
He,
and played with a lot.
yeah,
We've got a lot more tape of those guys facing really good competition. So I
yep.
can't get into that boat. That's a little too much for me.
I would say this. Quinyon Mitchell is not going to be my highest rated corner in this class. But I'm telling you right now that if he ended up being the first corner selected, though, more predictive than my actual analysis, I would not be shocked, is all I'm saying.
All right.
This feels a little Devin Witherspoon-ish to me. A little bit. Because you remember this time last year, people really liked Devin Witherspoon, but then the entirety of the process finally was like, he's CB1. Like, he's number one. He's the number one guy now. He was kind of jockeying with some dudes. Don't be shocked if when we come in April and then Quinyon, Nate Wiggins, Kool-Aid McKinstry, Tyrion Arnold, and the whole gamut are on the board, if someone doesn't go, I want that kid that was at the Senior Bowl that I saw that went to the combine and ran
Plausible.
4.3 something and dominated every top wide receiver you threw in front of him down in Mobile, Alabama. I just wouldn't be shocked if it happens. Would not be.
I did a quick write up that's supposed to drop on the Believe site that I said in there that Quinyon had the best week out of anybody. And then the last little sentence I threw in there is, and as he comes around to the combine, that's kind of the next phase here where he's going to continue to move up. So I wouldn't be shocked if he doesn't end up testing at an unbelievable level and then ends up being a top 15 pick when it's all said and done.
And I know we got to move on to the next group, but he for scouts this last spring, he ran between 4.38 and 4.42 when they visited Toledo. So a guy's going to run fast. And I know the former DPP of Toledo that's actually down at the University of Louisiana now, Ricky Saccone, he has informed me before, and I don't think this is like hidden information, but he's probably going to be a 40+ inch guy in the vert as well. Like, he's going to test outrageous, man. I just would not be shocked if he checks another box in Indianapolis.
Linebacker's a little bit of a weird one because like none of the linebackers really like excited me that much. I'm just gonna throw out there were a couple of reps I watched during coverage plays of Maris Loifau. I thought he looks nice. I'm not gonna sit here and say this is the top performer in the linebackers. I don't think I have anyone. I don't know about you. I don't really have anyone. I think that Maris Loifau, though, as we talked about the other day, long athlete, good athlete, maybe somebody who could make a little bit of ground up in that back end group of the linebackers where it's not a super sexy class. There's not a lot of really talented names in the grouping. So if somebody does end up making some of that ground up, maybe it's the guy with the freakishly long arms and really, really good close down speed. I think that Loifau is a name to bring up, the Notre Dame linebacker.
I actually talked to a scout about this, Joe, about Maris Loifau, and he put out a pretty interesting comp. Frankie Louvu, that plays for the Carolina Panthers, he's been very productive, obviously, for the Panthers the last 2 years, but he's kind of like a situational player in the sense that he moves all over the place. He's going to blitz for multiple spots, come off the edge at times. He's going to lock up against, big tight ends or big slots at times as well. He's kind of a Swiss Army knife on the second level, and I think that that's perfect for Maris. Like, I don't trust Maris Loifau as a pure read and react inside linebacker to make a ton of plays inside. I just don't. But if I simplify his role in the sense of, Maris, this is your job. Every single play, you're blitzing from this side. I'm going to automatically get you downhill. I'm going to put you in man-to-man at times because you're a good athlete with length. I just think doing those situational things would make him very successful. I wrote down Peyton Wilson, Joe. I wouldn't say that Peyton had a great week, but like,
he didn't
I thought
really
he was
pop,
good, though.
but like I just knew he was there. That's where I'm coming from. He didn't really gain anything for me because nothing changed. Like, I just know who Peyton Wilson is. That's why I didn't go with him.
I thought he just kind of checked the box this week. I don't think he put an exclamation mark next to the box, but I thought he was good, right? Like he was good, especially the second and third day. Like I thought he played well. And then I think it was the second day he had the GPS tracking stuff and he ran something pretty dang good, right? So I
Mm.
think just athletically, he looked apart. You could see the potential. Did he pop the way that I wanted him necessarily to pop? Not really, but like he wasn't bad either, right? Like it's not like he disappointed. He just didn't quite live up to lofty expectations, but I still thought he was good. And to your points, I just don't think there was a lot of great linebackers this week. Like I thought you mentioned the Watson kid from Mississippi State after day one. Like he
Yeah,
showed a little bit, but then
yeah,
I watched him on day two and I was like, he looked like he's feet got stuck in
yeah.
mud
I lost
on
him
a couple
after
cast
that.
coverages. Like, yeah. So I'll go with Peyton Wilson a little bit by default, but I actually thought he did have a solid to good week. Like it was solid. Rock solid.
Quarterback for
Yep.
me, kind of similar to the linebackers, where I feel like nobody really separated. Um,
Guys
Sam, Har-
disappointed, if anything. I wouldn't even say
yeah, like
separation. Like they disappointed a little bit.
yeah, if anything, there was more drop off. Like Sam Hartman, man, had a really really tough time a little bit on some of the plays that he made.
I
There
thought he
was
was good
one.
the first 2 days, though. I thought he was
Yeah,
pretty good the
today
first
was
two
rough. There
days.
was one play in
Yeah.
7-on-7 where he had like a wide open guy and he threw just the worst duck I've ever seen. And it wasn't even a deep throw. And I was just like, oh, come on, Sam. I'm rooting for you here. Like, just put a little bit more on it. But I don't want to be too negative here.
Yep.
I think that the guy, though, who stood out a little bit more than the rest was Michael Penix. Not really
Okay.
like consistent. Michael Penix from Washington was not like a down to down sniper. This was not a guy
Right.
who showed up on every single rep and was really clean. This is not a Daniel Jones type of ascension during the Senior Bowl week where everyone's losing their mind, or Justin Herbert where everyone's like, wow, look how clean this guy's been. Uh,
Right.
I think that what we got from him though is just the reminder of how he can deliver the ball into tight windows and how he's
Got a
just
strong
so
arm.
pretty pushing the ball to the sideline. Like the stuff that he
Yep.
does is unreal. And I also feel like a guy like him has a lot to gain from just meeting with these teams. We don't know. The biggest thing with the quarterbacks, and I said this on a radio spot earlier, the quarterback's on field performance to me doesn't really matter too much unless you completely shit your pants. It really, at the end of the day, this event for the quarterbacks is how those conversations with the teams that are interested in drafting you go and how those off the field interactions are, because they want to understand how you command the respect of the room, how do you rally the troops on the field and whatnot. That's the stuff that we're not going to be privy to unless we ask
Right.
a scout who they think.
Sure. I would say this is that I think that Michael Penix had some of the more wow throws of the week is kind of what that's how I would portray it. Like
Yes. Yeah.
I think so. I think it was Daniel Jeremiah that said in the booth. I can't remember if it was him or if it was Charles Davis, but someone had said that he is a really gifted thrower from compromised platforms, which basically means when his feet aren't set or he's fading off his back foot, like he still has enough juice in his arm to be able to get into some very tough spots for a lot of guys. So I thought he did pretty well. I will say this, Joe. I thought Bo Nix was bad the first 2 days. I did think he was good on day three, though. But
Yeah.
he's not going to be my pick, though. My pick is Michael Pratt from Tulane. I
I knew that
I
was
just thought he
coming.
was. I thought he was most solid through 3 days, right? Like I thought he was just pretty
Yeah.
good first
Yeah.
day, pretty
Well,
good
but
the
that's
second
that's
day,
what we
pretty good
know
the
with
third
Michael
day.
Pratt is that the guy's
Right?
just like he's so consistent and he's so freaking steady.
Yeah.
So like that's the reality of it.
He looked like he was Hartman had it the first 2 days as well. In the fact that I felt like Pratt really assimilated to everything a lot quicker. Like he really got the timing down a little bit more. He seemed a little bit more in command than maybe a couple of other quarterbacks. He seemed calm, which is good, right? And I think that he does have a pretty good arm. I think he delivered a pretty pass. I think that he had good pocket maneuverability this week as well. Like you could tell that he was just a little bit more comfortable hanging in. That's one of my favorite things about Michael Pratt's film is that he is a tough dude in the pocket, man. Like he will get knocked in the mouth, but he'll still stick in there. He's still sticking there. So I think the pocket presence combined with the calmness is kind of what sold me on Michael Pratt this week.
Running back, I was another one I was grappling with. I think I would have actually gone with Ali from Marshall, but
I'm
the
still going with
problem
Rashid
is
Ali. I'm still
I
going
know
with
that
Rashid
you are,
Ali.
and we're going to
Still.
talk about it. I want to bring up
Yep.
Dylan Laube. these damn commentators messed up my pronunciation of Dylan Lobb. I'm saying Lobb. I don't care. Daniel Jeremiah, Charles Davis, and Andrew
I heard like
Siciliano were
three
saying
different
it.
pronunciations this week, man.
Lobb.
Three different ones.
Dylan Lobb, the New Hampshire
Yep.
running back, I think
Yep.
opened my eyes because you and I had talked about this before where he's not like a really tough kid for a running back. You want to see a guy that's going to power through contact and that's going to get a little
Yep.
physical in the nitty gritty areas where you want him to. And doesn't really
Yep.
do that. Didn't do that at UNH, which is surprising because you expect from these UNH running backs to be physical. And from having
Tough
played
gritty
against UNH
kids.
in college, I got to see
Yep.
those guys up close. But I kind of started to realize this week when they were having him run all of these routes and they were asking him to play slot receiver. He's not going to be an every down running back. And I think that what was solidified is that this is a really quick footed, shifty guy who changes direction really well and is going to create separation as a route runner. And I think a team is going to draft him somewhere on day 3 and is going to have a player that brings him in on third down, can motion him into the slot, can have him run routes out of the backfield. You're not going to ask him to block because there's no shot that he's going to do a good job of that. And you're going to have him return kicks. Those are all the things that I think you get with a Dylan Lobb. I think he's just a strong football player that could be a little bit of a space eater. Space
a lot
killer,
of James
sorry.
White, space killer, yeah, space eater. He's a defensive tackle now. James White. James White's a name that comes to mind when you think about that role, right? Like James White was not going to be a every down runner. He was not going to be a guy that was going to push piles, but he was a specialized passing game weapon at the running back position and was about 5'10", 200 to 205 pounds, which is kind of where Dylan Lobb's right around. So I do think there's a role for him. I'm still going to pick Rasheen Ali for this, and it pains me to say, running back out of Marshall, Joe, I thought he was the best running back through 2 days. Like I just
I
thought he
agree.
was. Unfortunately, ruptured biceps tendon is
I'm
the
treating
surgery
this as
that he
like
needs.
a DNQ, like it did not qualify. Where like I think it
Yeah.
fits, but because at the end of the day, him getting hurt in
Mhm.
this like erases all the good work that he just did in a way because he's not going to get to go to the combine and like
I
I don't know how
know.
long 4 to 6
He was
months I
he
think
was
is the
gonna
recovery
he
timeline.
4 to 6 months is the timeline. Yeah, he should be he
Oh,
said it says that he should be ready for the 2024 season though with that
but training
timetable
camp?
and well, not training camp. No, probably not. But
That
I
sucks, man.
I I know, man, because Joe, what was the worst part is that he was probably going to test really well at
Yeah,
Indianapolis. I think he was going to test really well because that kid's got some juice, man. He got some short area quickness. I I loved everything I saw from that young man this week. I honestly feel for him, man, because I think that I came into the week and this was my claim. That's the day 3 running back that I want this year. That's him right there. But now, not only are you dealing with this injury, he also missed an entire season like 2 years ago due to another injury. I think it was a separate injury than what he's dealing with now, but regardless, the medicals matter in these things, man. They do. And now he's had 2 like significant injuries at this point and just feel very disappointed for the young man because again, through 2 days, I thought he was the best running back in attendance. I really thought Rasheen Ali was fantastic. So I'm just very,
yeah.
very disappointed that it had to end the way it ended. But he was still a tremendous performer for the time opportunities he got this week.
It was such a random gut punch in the middle of the broadcast when they just were like, "Oh yeah, this guy's out."
It
And
was
the
like
rest of the
nonchalant,
podcast.
wasn't it? Like, oh yeah, Rashid Ali's out. Like,
It's like,
okay, that's
okay, all right.
we had
I was
we
so
had too much
excited about him, but
too much airtime talking about Brendan Rice and Luke McCaffrey. I guess we couldn't fit in a little actual injury news, but
yeah.
yeah,
Wide receiver, I'm going with Brennan Rice from USC. Just kidding. I don't pick guys who take 8 seconds to run around. I do think though, man, wide receiver for me, I think that there were a lot of guys who we knew were going to do well, which we talked about on day
yeah,
1, because the one-on-one drills are set up for these quick shifty guys to just, move in and out of those cuts so easily, to run their routes really cleanly. But I
yeah.
got to go with Lad McConkey from Georgia. I really think that
It's
Lad
a good one.
McConkey just was really solid all week long. And the one thing that sticks out for me is not the fact that he created easy separation on his route running. I knew he was going to do that. It is advantageous for the receivers, as we've talked about. But to
Yep.
see his body control and his concentration catching the football just reminded me of the fact that this guy is going to be a really good slot receiver in the NFL. He is going to be a really
Yeah.
important player that could develop into a quarterback's best friend that just ends up being like the dump off guy. if there's a guy on day 2 that ends up being like really productive in the NFL, I think it could be Lyle McConkey. I think he's just a really solid football player.
I had
I'm
2
not
names
saying
written
like
down.
Cooper
Yeah.
Cup productive.
Meh.
Sorry, I mean
Sure.
I'm just saying like a good 1,000 yards. Sorry, go
I
ahead.
got you, man. No, you're good. He was one of the 2 guys I had written down. I was gonna probably say Lad if I would have went first, but I want to throw a shout out to Jabari Thrash, who is the former Georgia State wide receiver, was a dominant
Jamari,
player for them. What did I say? What did I say?
Jabari.
What did I say?
You said Jabari. It's Jamari. Jamari Thrash.
Oh, okay, my bad.
So
Jamari
I'm
Thrash.
just want to people get mad
Yeah.
about name stuff, so I just wanted to.
Okay, I'm sorry. Jamari Thrash, Georgia State, multiple years there, transferred, of course, his final year for Louisville. I remember seeing him for the Notre Dame game, was studying him a little bit, and I was like, dang, man, that kid's stop starts really good. He's got really good acceleration, good attention to detail as a route runner. And I thought that all showed up this week in Mobile. I mean, he's a little bit of a slender guy. He's only, sub 6 foot, hair under 6 foot. He's 180 something pounds, a little bit of a thin framed guy. But as a modern Z receiver that you can get off the line of scrimmage a little bit, do some short motions, maximize release points, I think that kid has a chance to be a very legitimate secondary weapon on the next level. I
Yeah,
don't think he's a number 1 receiver, but if you told me he was a really good number 3 or maybe even a low end wide receiver 2, I think that he has a profile that translates well to the modern game. So Jamari Thrash, excuse me, Louisville.
I just want to make sure it was right. I sometimes people get upset over names, so just want to make
I
sure
mean,
we
if
have it
they
right.
if they heard
I'm
our show
saving you. I'm
yesterday, they
saving
would
you.
have.
I'm correcting you.
If you heard our show yesterday, you would have heard Joe talk about Ryan Rosengarten and
Well, you
who was the
corrected
other
me.
guy?
You
What was the
corrected
other
me. So
name?
that
Yeah, I know, I
I
know.
forget what the other one was that I said. Wait, what was it? I'm looking at
I don't
the
remember
listed
either.
guy. I had a list written down. I'm trying to remember who I might have messed up. I don't know who it was.
It's all right.
Regardless,
Yes,
tight end to wrap us up. It's Theo Johnson.
Theo
I mean,
Johnson. Theo
I'm
Johnson.
all
Yeah,
in on Theo Johnson after James
yeah.
Franklin quote tweeted me. In actuality, his social media manager quote tweeted me. He has no idea that tweet interaction even happened.
He has
But
no idea what
regardless,
Twitter is. No idea what Twitter is. Yeah,
yeah, the quote. If you go to his feed, it's really funny. If you go to his Twitter feed,
yeah.
after it happened, I clicked into it. He quote tweeted my thing with just hashtag we are. His whole feed is him just quote tweeting stuff with
Hashtag we
hashtag
are.
we are, hashtag we are, hashtag. It's so funny. I got a kick out of that. That if he's the one doing it, it makes it even funnier.
It's
But it's
hilarious.
clearly
Yeah.
just some GA who's doing it. Theo Johnson, though,
Yeah.
you put me on to him, and I felt so stupid not really like knowing him when we talked about tight ends last week with a mailbag question.
Yep.
And I'm all in on him. This is tight end 3. I mean, he might even challenge for tight end 2 if he goes to the combine and puts some crazy numbers up. This is a really just linearly explosive athlete who changes direction so well. I think that he is going to be a really nice weapon in the NFL. You heard the Mike Gesicki comparison brought up on the broadcast, but I would
I don't
argue
love
he
that.
changes
I don't love
direction so
that.
much better than what Mike Gesicki did. And I
Yeah.
have to also add in there, some idiot on Twitter, I told you this, was like, I said that not many tight ends in the NFL can change direction and move the way that Theo Johnson does, because that's true. A lot of tight ends in
Yeah.
the NFL are boats. They do not move that easily. And some guys are like, I can name 20. And I said, name 20 tight ends, and I'll admit I'm
Did he
wrong.
name 20? Did he name him?
No, didn't say shit. If somebody in the comments wants to give it a shot, though, I'm more than down to read your work. But yeah, are we on the same page though? Here it sounds like Theo Johnson.
Yeah, it was Theo. I did like a little bit of, what a couple other, like Brevin Spanford, I thought was solid this week,
Yeah,
right? Like there were a
yeah.
couple. I thought
The
Ben
Wiley kid,
Sin-
you.
yeah. I agree. There was definitely some flashes there. I thought Ben Sinnott got off to a little bit of a slow start, but picked it up by day 3. But yeah, I mean, it was Theo Johnson. I mean, that kid is the most underutilized player by his respective team, probably of any pass catcher that was in Mobile. I mean, the fact that he barely had over 300 yards this past year, I know he was battling with a little bit of an injury at one point, but that kid's a 6'6", 250 something pound athlete that is going to run potentially in the high 4.4s at the combine. Ran 4.51 electric while he was at Penn State. So the fact that he came and did what he did, I think that he is a perfect candidate, Joe. And again, I hate this cliche because I think it's usually wrong, but he is the perfect candidate to be a better pro than he was a college player. I think it's definitely in his wheelhouse.
I will also love to throw in there. We do this obnoxiously sometimes when a guy has a big season as a rookie. We always go, who's this year's so and so? Theo
Yep.
Johnson could be next year's Sam Laporta, man. Like a guy that just was not really used. Nobody totally knows who he is. And then,
Hey
he
man,
bursts on
Sam
the scene,
Laporta
has a good year.
was a very productive player for Iowa. He was very productive. He was. He
Was
had like over
he?
600 yards his last year. Yeah, man, he was good for Iowa. You
Yeah,
just
but he
don't
was at
remember because
Iowa. So
you were just mad because you had to watch Spencer Petras throw the football all the time. Like it was
that
ugly, but
is,
yeah, man, Laporta was good. He was a good player.
at
So,
670
like,
yards, 3 touchdowns.
I
What do
told
you
you, I
know?
watched it, man. I watched it. Yeah,
Oh,
I mean,
no,
I
wait.
know.
Sorry, it's 657 and 1 touchdown. That was
I mean,
his junior
I mean,
year.
still over 600 yards, a good number by a tight end. It's a good number.
At Joe DeLeone, at Rising Draft. Thank you for tuning in. Hit that subscribe button. Do not miss out. And if you want to drop a comment below, let us know who you think had a really good week, who you're excited about in the NFL. Thanks for tuning in as always. We'll be back with more.